The Left Hand of Darkness is a book written in 1969 by Ursula Guin. It's about a male human diplomat that goes to a new planet to try to recruit its inhabitants to a coalition of humanoid species. But the social differences between this new planet and its residents and the main character's human norms proves to be difficult. It's a book about the role gender plays in society, but to just call it that does a disservice to the rest of what it shows. It has much more pervasive themes, in my opinion, of the power of empathy, the danger of othering, and the beauty of friendship. In this world, humans are a spacefaring race, and they have this coalition of worlds called the Ecumen. The group sends out diplomats with the purpose of trying to recruit new planets to join them. One of these diplomats is called Guin, and he's sent to a planet called Gethin, or Winter, where he is tasked with trying to get them to join their federation. It's made up of two major cities called Karhide and Orgaren. They have their differences, but there is no war. No war is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the differences between humans and Gathenians, and this difference is where the meat of the book comes in. Le Guin spends much of the first half of this book explaining the differences between the Gathenians and humanity, and these differences are alien enough to not feel didactic, but they're relatable enough to have real meaning. One of them, and the one that's talked about most for this book, is that the Gathenians are androgynous, so every once in a while they shift into either a male or a female form. It's still binary. They become sexually aroused and mate in this state. The thing is, during one sexual cycle you can become male, and the next one you can become female. So in one cycle you can impregnate, and one cycle you can become impregnated, even in the same life. They also have unique religions, customs, and attitudes that make them different from humanity. They've got this thing called Shifgrethor that they talk about a lot in it, which is sort of how you hold yourself in a conversation that you're having with another person. In Gathenian culture, taking your life is the absolute worst, most immoral thing you can possibly do. I also notes different little things, like how the Gathenians only drive up to a maximum of 25 miles per hour because progress is less important than presence. So the Gathenians are presented as a human-like species, but different in a lot of distinct ways. The big main theme for me is othering and acceptance. I is there for years, and he's not really accepted by either of the main cities on the planet. When he's most betrayed by the world, he's saved by one man. I won't say his name, but he has no business saving I. I never trusted him, he never treated him well, and he never showed any particular liking towards this man whatsoever. I want to talk about something that I'd like to call the trek. Relationships are only as good as they are when they're tested, and at the climax of this book, I and his savior go on this trek through 80 miles of ice sheets, and this is, I can comfortably say, my favorite sequence of chapters that I've ever read in any book ever. I and his savior sort of learn to trust each other and love each other in a wholesome, pure way that I rarely see in books I read and in the media that I consume. Embarrassingly, it was written in such a way that I thought for sure it was going to culminate in some sort of passionate physical love affair at its climax, and when that didn't happen, I felt silly. What Le Guin does is she expresses love in its purest form. Through their differences, they love each other, and that's not because they want anything from each other, but because they respect each other as just sentient beings. Le Guin acknowledges this beautifully as follows: "For it seemed to me, and I think to him, that it was from that sexual tension between us, admitted now and understood but not assuaged, that the great and sudden assurance of friendship between us rose. A friendship so much needed by both in our exile, and already so well proved in the days and nights of our bitter journey, that it might as well be called, now as later, love. But it was from the difference between us, not from the affinities and likenesses, but from the difference, that love came, and it was itself the bridge, the only bridge, across what divided us. For us to meet sexually would be for us to meet once more as aliens. We had touched, in the only way we could touch. We left it at that." The emotional beauty of this is matched with the beauty of the description of the landscape on this perilous but beautiful trek. It's like when you sort of notice something beautiful, like a cute bird chirping or the moon shining on one of your darkest days. There's this melancholy contentness surrounding the entire thing. Another big theme of the book is platonic love, and this comes up in a plethora of ways. Platonic love comes up between different people, like in the relationship between I and his savior. Le Guin also comments on love for one's country, and I'm sorry to read off so many quotes, but Le Guin just has so many beautiful little quotable moments that I feel like I'm not doing the book justice if I don't share at least a few of these with you. How does one hate a country or love one? Tybes talks about it. I lack the trick of it. I know people. I know towns, farms, hills, and rivers and rocks. I know how the sun at sunset in autumn falls on the side of a certain plowland in the hills. But what is the sense of giving a boundary to all that, of giving it a name and ceasing to love where the name ceases to apply? What is love of one's country? Is it hate of one's own country? Then it's not a good thing. Insofar as I love life, I love the hills and the domain of Esther, but that sort of love does not have a boundary line of hate, and beyond that I am ignorant. These little nuggets of quotable wisdom are sprinkled all throughout the final third of the book. There's also definitely some thematic weight on religion, but I'll be honest, that wasn't the thing that touched me the most, and it was a little bit difficult for me to understand, but it would certainly be something at the top of my list to pay attention to on my next reread. Sex and gender difference manifest most on the page, most obviously, but to me it's done really in the context of the biggest theme of the book, which is the othering. A brilliant way that Le Guin does this in her writing is through challenging the reader with reading about an androgynous society. Even as you read, you find yourself seeing the Gathenians through a lens of male and female, based on their traits and their occupations and more. And to see that bias exposed in yourself is humbling. In terms of negatives, I mean, God, this book does not have a lot, but thinking back on the book, I think the things that first come into my head is certainly all of the positives, but if I really put on my critical thinking cap, I would say that the exposition and the first half of the book in general are quite dense, and they're used to set up a lot of terminology and relationships. It drags on a bit, and I think some people would find this frustrating, but for me, the payoff is so big that I didn't mind it. A lot of science fiction is about world building in a visual sense, where you learn about the new races of aliens and how their claws are sharper than knives, and how they can teleport, and how they can transform and breathe underwater, and on and on and on. The Left-Handed Darkness is more of a psychological case study on an astoundingly interesting race. It doesn't have the action and the intrigue that something like a space opera might have, but instead it focuses on the actions of a single culture of this alien race and uses it as a vehicle for Le Guin to further some really fascinating challenges and themes about life on Earth. This book did something that I think is really difficult to pull off, and it created a book with accessible enough themes that you feel like you can get things out of it on a single read without it being too dull and obvious. My philosophy on books is that I don't like when they use excuses like, you have to read this multiple times or spend hours analyzing the text. I'm in the middle of reading the Book of the New Sun. Because that's not how books are written, in my opinion, and that's not how I want to consume books. So I think that it's this delicate balance between being too difficult and not pushing the book enough philosophically, and Le Guin just finds a perfect medium here. In my opinion, the time period that this book was written in is dominated by some extremely adventurous and fun books, but ones that ultimately feel somewhat dated because of their portrayal of gender and, honestly, their othering of groups of people, regardless of what those groups may be. Le Guin, in The Left-Handed Darkness, crafts a forward-thinking, timeless novel not just about the role gender plays in society, but more importantly, about the themes of the importance of common humanity and platonic camaraderie and partnership. Thanks for watching.